Let me ask you this. What is it that's beautiful? What's beauty look like? What does it feel like? Beauty looks like all kinds of things, doesn't it? It's one of those things, we know it when we see it. That's kind of what we would say. I know it when I see it. I may not be able to call to mind, or I could call to mind a general idea of what beauty is. So we use words like relationship. Sometimes we attach it specifically to a person to define a whole relationship. But if we were to sort of peel the onion, we'd say, well, what moment in that relationship was really beautiful? And why was that beautiful? And it probably would come from something else. And why was that a catalyst for this beauty? I mean, you can keep peeling it down if you just keep asking why, right? Because why gets us to the core of all of the questions of life. So wondering how true it is and how often it is that we are so distracted that we miss what is beautiful. Because it's easy to get distracted, huh? It's easy to get busy, it's easy to get preoccupied. It's easy to get focused on your own stuff and your own situation, on your own junk and your own problems and conversations and ideas, your own agendas. If it's not easy for you, I'll tell you it's easy for me to do that. And I miss beauty all the time, all the time. I miss beauty because of my attitude going into something, because of my thoughts coming out of something. I miss beauty in moments because I spend so much time trying to break down what's happening or what someone's saying or what I should be doing next out of this conversation, that just being in that moment with someone that could be so beautiful and so profound, I miss it. It's like I'm on the run. I'm going from one place to the next. Do you ever find yourself like that? How many times does the phone ring and you're sitting in that chair and you think, right? Really? Did you not get the memo? Or calls from people who they just want to grind an axe with you about something, some decision, well, why, and can you, and do you, and I need to know, and I really, and it's just that, really? Or there's a project that's upcoming. Maybe it's even something that is worthwhile, but it's a ton of work. And there are so many details that get done, and you can just plow through it, and you've got to talk to a million people. And what's beautiful in all of that? What's beautiful in the mundane, day-to-day course of going from one place to the next? It's a good question, especially when you're on the run and you're on the go. So you think about beauty, you think about meaning. You think about tying those two things together, because when you can tie them together, it's really powerful. We get so busy and distracted that we miss beauty and we just take meaning for granted. You remember the first job you ever did in ministry? Very first day, very first task. Why'd you hold on to that anyway? Why do you know that? Why do you know that? Why do you remember it's a second grade class? Why do you remember it's a group of leaders? Why that specific? Because it was beautiful and it was meaningful. And they met and it just seared your soul. It won't let you go. First day I was in ministry, I was hired as an intern, South Coast Community Church in Irvine. It's now Mariners. And first job I was given, very first day. Said, all right, we get this old shed. And the shed was about the size of this closet here. It was actually 3 times as deep, but it was just a huge shed. And all of the ministries, the high school, the college, children's, men's, everybody had used this shed to put gear in. And it hadn't been cleaned out in about 2 years. So you know how that goes, right? I tell you what, I can still remember that day like it was a week ago. I remember what I was wearing. I was so fired up to clean out that shed. I got every single item out of that shed. I mean, there were hundreds of items. I wiped them all down. I hosed off some of the boxes they were in. I broke tents down. I set them up and broke them down, so I knew I had all the pieces to these tents. I mean, it took me an entire day from 8 a.m. all the way, and I was working into the night, and it was summertime, so the day was longer. Tirelessly, I was fired up on this shed. And that moment for me has sort of become a metaphor for what we do in ministry. How meaningful, how beautiful it can be, and really what we're doing. We're coming into a mess. We're unpacking all the stuff, sorting it out, and then putting it back in a way that people can find it and make sense of what they're doing. There's these moments of beauty and meaning, and they meet unexpectedly sometimes. But we're so distracted that we miss them a lot. And it happens usually out of the ordinary stuff of life, right? Every night when my kids are growing up, their bedrooms are upstairs in our home. And so their rent is a little cheaper. They charge them a little less to stay there. But when they were growing up, their rooms were all upstairs. As the homework got later and, life gets rolling, I still wanted to just pray over them and pray for them. So every night I'll go and stand in the hall. I stand in the hall of my house and I stand upstairs. And I stretch out my hands. And I pray over them. And I've said the same prayer for lots of years. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord give you wisdom. May the Lord give you hearts to seek him and find him. May the Lord give you courage as you follow him to be like him. May the Lord protect you from the sins of your father. May the Lord love you into the deepest places of your life. And may you know yourself as God's forever loved child. What is that? It's just a moment. It's just the thing that I do every day. It can even lose meaning. Sometimes when I say lose meaning, I'll go upstairs sometimes out of duty, right? Or out of obligation. Some people say, you can't do anything out of duty. It has no meaning. Seriously, right? Then don't return the phone call that you have dutifully agreed to return. See how that goes for you. Sometimes we do things out of duty. We do it out of necessity, and that's okay. It doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. Here's what I mean. So I had been at Newport Mesa for 5 years or so. It took me a while to really sort of love the church. And I came to a place where after going through a period of time, I felt like, man, I want to say something over this church, say something good to these people. And I didn't know what to say. And I started thinking about life and like what I could say to the church that would be really meaningful and like from a deep place in my heart, like something that God had given me. And I really thought about that. So I started saying a prayer. So I said a prayer over my church. So that was 7 years ago. Fast forward to the last Sunday I was at Newport Mesa. So last Sunday, it's last day, I've got my daughter Madison on FaceTime in Boston. So she's watching the service. She's there. And I bring my daughters up on stage. And I just sort of, as we're going through the service, I just stop the service, essentially. Not just saying, wait a minute or stuff, but I address my daughters, like in front of the room that's waiting to leave. And I say to them, I said, let me tell you how I came to this prayer that I pray over the church every week. I said I wanted to say to them the very best thing that I could say. I wanted to love them in the best way that I could. And I wanted them to remember it. And the best thing that I could think to say to them was something that I have said to you hundreds and said over you hundreds and hundreds of times. And God gave them, this church, that because of you. I never saw that moment coming. That's not why I prayed, because the prayer I prayed over the church every week, many of you have been to our church. When I stand up as our benediction, I say, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. That prayer has so much beauty and so much meaning to me. And to be able to share that with my daughters, and subsequently the church, changed the whole story of that. Sometimes we just move along and we just assume things are sort of random. So, here's Jacob in Genesis 28. He's on the run, right? He's stolen his brother's blessing, and he's on the run. He's obviously distracted by the events of his life. This is not a beautiful time. This is not a beautiful place. And there he is, and he's desperate, and he just plops down, and he goes to sleep, and he has a dream, doesn't he? There's a ladder, right? He wakes up and he makes a statement. He says, "And surely the Lord was in this place, and I did not know it." I didn't know it. How about that? It was a sacred spot he was in the middle of his confusion, while he was on the run, while he was broken, while he was desperate. Question for you, like cleaning out the shed, like the first leadership meeting you sat in, the first flyer you made, the phone call you returned, the second grade class, whatever it was that you did. You remember how beautiful that was? How meaning? Surely the Lord was in that place. And you sort of assumed it then. And when your phone rings and you're sitting in your chair, that chair all of a sudden is a holy spot because you don't know who's on the other end of that phone. Maybe it's an intern you're talking to. Maybe it's a pastor who's just really discouraged in their marriage. And they're calling about an event, but there's a whole world like behind what's going on. Just taking a beat in a second. I love what you started with, and I love what you say. You know, you're here to serve. I mean, that's what you do. There's beauty in that. There's meaning in that. Wherever you are, the Lord is in whatever place you are. You can know that. You can remember that. God was in that prayer every night for my girls, for my church. God was in cleaning out that shed, my whole ministry, because that's what it is. I've got other stories. You've got stories of beauty and meaning where God met you in a way that you say, man, I didn't know God could use that. I didn't know God would use that. And I pray that you'd find that today.